Hey everyone, this is Elon from the Egard podcast, and there's a really interesting thing, going on with Roe v. Wade and kind of the response to it across the country. And so I put out a post trying to start a conversation about this. I'm more on the pro-life side, so I requested, "Hey, is anyone on the pro-choice side willing to come on and debate or have a conversation more?" So I don't really think it should be
Yeah.
more conversation. And only one person responded. And I must say, I'm very glad that you did.
Yeah.
Welcome, Greg Rivera.
That's right, Greg Rivera. Some people know me as Greg Mishka. I'm actually wearing my pink hat today. This is our classic eyeball.
Yeah, so give a shout out to your brand and what you do. Listen, I'm in the fashion industry. We make watches, we make some jewelry. So
Yeah.
it's a good shout out to our customer base for what you do as well.
Yeah. So I co-founded the brand back in 2003. So we've been doing it for almost 20 years. It's kind of gone through different changes over the years. My partner who I started with, I'm no longer uh, working together with him. Been in LA for about 8 years now, so it's still going. I mean, if you're in the fashion market has changed a lot, especially in the past 20 years, especially with streetwear. But we're just cranking, just doing our thing, and I'm rocking one of my. This is our like kind of I guess pun intended, iconic graphics. It's the Keep Watch eyeball. And I figured I'd wear the pink version today. So,
I mean, you're just an all around interesting guy politically. You kind of fall in different places on different issues. So I figured this would be a really good. I was actually glad you responded. I'm actually curious what your positions are on a lot of things. So I think the pro-choice, pro-life conversation is one of the toughest conversations in the country right now. You have 50% of the country, I believe. Interestingly enough, by the way, when I started talking about this, everyone told me that I'm a man, I shouldn't have an opinion about it. And it's funny that we're two men sitting here talking about it. Do you feel that men should not have an opinion about it? That's my first question for you.
um, here's the thing: is I think this it comes more to my bigger stance. Is I honestly think that, and I guess it kind of goes to where I'm pro-choice. I feel like it shouldn't be anyone's opinion but the individual. Now, when I
Okay.
say that, I think that just like any other like medical procedures, a lot of times people, um, you know, as much as they listen to their doctor, they're also going to confide in their family and their friends. Because I think that abortion, especially, I I I feel like, and at least the women that I've known that have had abortions, the women in my life or that I've talked to, um, it was never an easy choice for them. It
Why
had to do.
not? Do you mind me asking you a question? Why wasn't it an easy choice?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe more so on like kind of maybe personal things that they were going through. It could have been that they got pregnant young.
Oh, no,
Um,
no, I'm not asking the reasoning. I'm asking,
oh,
why was the abortion itself a hard choice? I mean, if an abortion is just the ending of a clump of cells that has no inherent value, why would it be a hard choice?
well, because I don't, maybe because I don't think that. I guess that's also where maybe I fit in a little differently. Is I don't necessarily think being pro-choice means that you don't think that you're terminating a life. Um,
Okay.
but I do think that there is a reason why you might make that decision. Now, we could get into ethical and moral issues, but I think that as far as like um, this idea of deciding to not have a child is, I guess, I guess the way that I'm looking at it. I'm not looking at it in a sense of scientifically what, where, and when a fetus has, I guess, and I
Well,
guess
here,
it
here,
was
let me, so let's just go off of that. I understand what you're saying. You're
okay.
saying it's essentially a life. You acknowledge that it's a life and that she's terminating it, but you feel like it's a practical necessity in society and it's her choice because it's in her body, essentially. And it's
That's sort of how I see it. But I don't, but I also feel like that it's not, it's generally not something that a woman can do by herself. I mean, there are pills and there's things like that, but I think, when it comes to a point where you have this whatever fetus baby growing inside of you, and because as far as
Can I ask you a question? At what point
Okay.
is it not okay to terminate the fetus? 8 months?
Again, it's a hard question to say, because when you talk about the timing, right? This is where I think the conversation gets interesting, because you start talking about laws.
Forget laws. Let's just talk ethics first, and then we can discuss laws second, because then it'll just become a convoluted decision. Let's just talk about the ethics of it. When is it wrong? When is it ethically wrong to kill the human, which is a fetus in development? What developmental stage and why?
Ethically, I mean, I personally think that, well, I think that statistically, it's probably pretty rare that a woman gets an abortion at 8 months.
Depends on the country, and it depends on.
Sure, but I'm saying statistically speaking, I don't think that I think if you probably, and again, I don't have this in front of me, but I think if you look statistically, I think the majority of women who are getting abortions is probably not at 8 months. It's probably in the, 20, and again, I'm not, this was sort of, I'm not, maybe I think it's within the range of, let's say with Roe versus Wade, where it's like
it is in the range of Roe v. Wade. Yeah. But again, there's still tens of thousands of babies that have been aborted late term. There's many that aren't recorded. That's still tens of thousands of lives, regardless of those. So you would say, that's why I'm just trying to get.
I would say ethically, I would definitely question somebody ethically and morally if they decided to terminate their pregnancy at 8 months. I guess I would need more information to determine.
But why would you question it?
Well, because I think if it was a case where the baby was, if the baby was born, the baby would die anyway. And there was
you know what? Okay, sorry, that's just one of. I don't mean to. If we start getting into like the exceptional 0.001% cases that no one really disagrees over, like you're right. If the baby's getting
8 months is also, I think 8 months is statistically something that is not. Like, I don't see, this is the problems. I don't think that's where the majority of the argument. I think that's where the extreme, there's the extreme side.
Sure, but I'm just trying to get from an ethical. Why is it wrong to terminate an 8-month-old fetus? Forget if it's happening. Forget just the ethics behind it. Why is it wrong? Yeah, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, I think it would be wrong in the sense that that's when you could scientifically, like, there would be no, apart from the baby having any sort of medical issues or the baby presenting an issue to the mother. I think that scientifically and not ethically, I think most people could agree that at that point the baby is a viable baby, and
babies have been born viable at 20 weeks. 19, I think, is now the earliest, and viability is constantly changing.
So in my opinion, I kind of think it's moot then, because it's like, if you believe that you're killing a baby, if you believe that a woman shouldn't have an abortion at 12 weeks or an abortion at 8 months, then it doesn't really matter, because it becomes this sense of, it really just depends on what you believe, as far as like, if it's an ethical or if it's a legal issue. And I guess I'm pro-choice more on, I guess, an issue that, as humans, we have the right to control our body and our own destiny.
Sorry, I have to counteract that point. We don't. Okay. I don't have the right to go out and stab somebody with my body. You know what I mean? I'm holding the knife. I can't go to the government and be like, well, you can't tell me not to hold this knife and do this into this person's body. I don't have the right to go smoke and blow it in my kid's face. I don't have, the government regulates any situation where
you don't have the right, but you don't have the right to do that, but there's consequences to that.
Well, I do not have the legal right to do that. I may have the capability, but I don't have the legal right. In the case of abortion, we're actually saying there's a secondary person, right? You acknowledge that it's a human life. It just so happens to be inside the womb of the mother. So it's geographically located there.
Yeah.
Is that your reason? So I'm trying to just essentially understand the reasoning that makes it okay to kill the baby. You agree it's a human life. We haven't yet agreed on a timeline of when it's okay, when it's not okay. That's something that I'll dish out more with you later. My fundamental point is you're saying, well, we should have control over our bodies. Okay, well, we also do not have the right to harm other human beings. That's from the beginning of time, one of the baseline kind of ethical agreements that humans have made with each other, because it would just be chaos otherwise. And all our laws are based on that fundamentally, even if you look from a standpoint of what government should protect against. If you looked at the most limited form of government, that would be one of the things they do. They would stop people from harming other people. They would implement consequence for that. So in the case of abortion, you have one person taking the life of another person. The argument becomes, is it okay because of ... Now, most arguments I see are based on development or dependence. That's why I'm trying to kind of get to where and I'm happy you actually agree it's a human life. If there's no agreement that it's a human life, then it becomes a very hard conversation. We both agree it's a human life. You're saying there's a need to end it.
Sure. And so I guess that's why I don't look at, I guess I don't look at the time frame per se. I mean, I do understand the point, like, and I know like, yeah, if you shoot a woman who's pregnant and you kill the child, then you're charged with killing the child as well. So
well, not always. It depends on the state, but yeah, people would consider that double homicide, which is hypocritical. It can't be both.
Right. So I guess for me, I guess I'm looking at it, I guess, if you want to say like more granular, because I think that, and again, I'd have to look statistically and like, but I think, and I don't know, but I'd assume that the majority of abortions are done at a time where, and again, I know that it's kind of hard to explain. Maybe I can't articulate it right, but I think that when there's a point where, let's say this, I guess there's a point where I think generally, and as a society, we feel like it's more acceptable than other points in it. And so I understand. And so for me, it's kind of a hard question to answer, because I feel, and again, I'd have to do the research, but
I can tell you, I mean, the vast majority of abortions do occur around the, end of the first trimester into the second trimester. Sure. They don't occur late statistically. They occur for reasons of the overwhelming majority. We're talking about in the high 90th percentiles, occur for reasons of convenience. Don't want my body to change. Don't have the money to raise a child. My boyfriend left me, or relationship changes will affect my education, will affect my job. So if you look at those reasons, those are reasons that are, by any standard, reasons of convenience, right? You don't want your life to change in a way that'll make it more difficult or not as appealing to you. So you are terminating a life.
So, okay. So, and I think that's where, well.
And you feel like that's ethical as a society? I mean, that's my question. Really, at the end of the day, what we're saying is we don't want to deal with inconvenience, because we've dehumanized a population so much. And this actually just reminds me a lot of every other point in history where the dehumanization of people has resulted in millions of deaths, and somehow was acceptable because based on some man-made criteria, because we cannot really base it off the criteria of being human. In other words, my position is, if we're human, we shouldn't kill each other unless there's an imminent threat to your life. Someone's actively trying to kill you, right? Because if we use any other standard, it becomes highly subjective. The reason that Nazis killed Jews was because they were less of a person. The reasons that slavery was okay was because we convinced a huge percentage of the population they were less of a person. Now, the supposition is always, we want to control people, or we want to kill people due to whatever reason, convenience, right? Slavery was great for the white population. They got free labor. So what's the way to get there? Dehumanize. And we've done that to actual unborn babies in our society, in my opinion. We've convinced everyone that these things have no moral value or inherent value in society. And I see no argument that says they're not a person. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Well, okay. So I don't want to comment on Nazis or slavery, because I was,
well, I mean, and I'm not all about Godwin's law. Listen, my family was killed on my dad's side in the Holocaust. I'm not a fan of comparisons, but it is an apt. The reason I brought it up was because dehumanization allows for the killing of people and then the justification of it, which is a very specific thing I see taking place here.
So here's something else that I was just thinking about. So as much as I think that convenience is something that I think one of the bigger issues, and I think why it's such an issue now, is because I think convenience is something that is available in the West. Let's say, if let's talk about the United States because we're here. But, I think that it's more convenient for me to go to McDonald's. I mean, I don't eat meat, but it's more convenient for me to go to McDonald's and get a hamburger and French fries than to cook food at home. But
Sure.
the biggest cause of death in the United States is heart disease. So you could make an argument that, these giant corporations, in league with the pharmaceutical companies, are trying to give people processed foods, give people corn syrup, give people sugar,
Sure.
so that so look,
But what does that have to do with killing an innocent unborn
because
baby?
here's the thing is I think there's a bigger picture. I think there is this, look,
we're talking, but yeah, but that becomes,
I do think,
I mean, again, that's what either a baby is a
point.
person and has a right to life, or it doesn't.
Here's my point. I do think that we live in a society where there's kind of a cult of death, right? And I think there's this
Self-inflicted. No, but it's self-inflicted death. It's, in other words, if you want to go and eat a
maybe.
hamburger, you're damaging yourself. If you want to go kill a baby, we all, in other words, if the second the baby's born, we all somehow are in agreement, absolute agreement, that it's a travesty to kill it. We all agree with that. You know what else we agree with? That if it's a miscarriage, that it's a tragedy. So what we don't agree on is that if the mother decides to kill it at any specific point, that it's not a tragedy. Why?
Well, but see, that's right. I guess that's where I disagree. I guess it just depends on who you're talking to, because
I'm talking to people who are pro-choice. I mean, that's really the conversation here.
Because I don't know that everybody is going to look at it as a tragedy, and you might call it selfish, you might call it unethical, but I think that's why there's a debate scientifically. And so
I mean, there is no debate scientifically. There is no scientific debate. I mean, the only every biologist in the world will agree that life begins at conception. That's just the standard. Now, what they might disagree on is the definition of a person, which is not a scientific debate. That's a philosophical debate. And again, when you start getting philosophical with the value of human life, it becomes very, very dangerous, as history has proven. So I'm just asking, and I'm not saying we should put women in prison. I'm saying the reason I'm having this conversation with you is because there has to be a massive cultural shift. The way to solve the mass amounts of abortion, we're talking about millions of babies being killed, is to have conversations that make people understand you are terminating a life, and the convenience is not a cause to terminate a life. Just like if the baby was just born, right? And now it's driving me crazy, I lost my job, I should not be allowed to go chop my baby up, which is what we're saying you could do just because it's in the womb, because it's geographically located in the mother, or because of some kind of development, which is, and that's why I'm trying to get to the bottom of how you feel about it.
I mean, I guess I kind of fall into the 1990s Democrat, safe, legal, and rare, because, I don't think that, like you just said, I don't think a woman should be put in jail for having an abortion. I don't think a doctor should be put in jail for having an abortion. I don't know if that's something that you agree with or not, but
so I'm libertarian, just so you know. I believe the states should decide the laws on abortion, and the people should be the voice of the state. And so hopefully they can implement whatever laws they see fit within those states. Me personally, again, I mean, my first line of attack for abortion is what I'm doing now. I think that's where the fight is, the culture, because we have culturally convinced everyone, not everyone, a huge percentage of the population, that it's okay, or that even if they don't feel it's okay, they should side that it's okay because it's a woman's choice. Well, and what we're saying is it's a woman's choice to kill her baby. It's not. It's not her choice when it's born. It's not her choice at 9 months, and it shouldn't be her choice at 6 months. In other words, it becomes like a very weird concept to me.
Well,
that if you really sit and think about it, we're killing a child.
Well, I don't think it's that weird because I think on the other extreme side, you also have to make a decision if, if you want to take somebody off life support or not. Because
Again,
at a certain point, I mean, they might have made a decision, but sometimes they haven't. And so it's really up to a lot of people leave it up to the family to decide. And so it's a situation where you could potentially keep somebody alive. Is it wrong to kill that person because they're only being kept alive by a machine?
can I tell you why that's not an accurate comparison?
I mean,
The only way that comparison works is if you have a guarantee that within a month or two, that person's going to wake up and develop and be fully functional, because that's what a fetus is. It's not like a fetus is on life support and never going to come out of it. A fetus is guaranteed, short of some kind of sudden severe illness or tragedy, to develop into it.
Well, it's not guaranteed though. That's the thing, is there's always, I mean,
Maybe
statistically it's guaranteed, but like there's no
Okay, so
guarantee.
if you're in a coma and there's a 99.9 statistical percent chance that you'll wake up from the coma in a week, can I go kill you?
I would
Obviously not. Obviously not. Let's just be realistic, which is what you're saying should be the standard for a fetus, because so it's the comparisons have to be accurate, right? You can't leave out the part that we know this will develop into an adult. You, me, we were once just this supposed clump of cells that's a parasite that everyone likes to call it. And look where we are today. We know that is the natural evolutionary progression of a fetus. A fetus will develop into a toddler, into a teenager, into an adult. And just like any tragedy might happen, an infant could die, a teenager could die, an adult could die. You get in a car accident. It's not a cause to say it has no moral value.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what it comes down to is believe, it's, to me, it becomes more of an, I think more than anything, and I think from talking to you, it seems to me how you feel, that it comes from more of a moral position than anything else, because in nature, obviously a lot of animals like kill their babies as soon as they're born.
Sure.
Or and there's no, it's not like we're gonna arrest a dolphin for killing a baby. You know what I'm saying?
No, but we're not animals.
But we, so I guess it depends on like, it really does depend on what you believe, because it's like, I don't self-identify with any certain religious, like I grew up Christian. I grew up very like Protestant, like fire and brimstone. Come to find out later, my mom's side of the family was Jewish, but my grandmother was like the only one out of like 7 kids who didn't raise her kids, by the faith. So,
I don't believe in, I'm not trying to make a religious argument. I'm trying to make.
Yeah. And so but I think what happens is, I think a lot of times when you think about, right, because like,
can I ask you this one question? Does human life have inherent value? Yes or no? Like the fact that you exist, does that have value?
I think human life has inherent value.
Should you have a right to life based on that value? Short of obviously cases where you're about to kill somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should have a right to life, but I guess my point is that we could get into the amount of time, but I think that I guess I just feel that when the baby is inside the womb and there's a decision to be made if that life wants to continue or not, I think it should be based on what a woman and a doctor decides more so than the state.
Okay, but why should you be allowed to kill the baby because it's in the womb? Would it be wrong? Would you be okay with the state saying that we're going to stay out of killing your newborn until it's 1 year old? And what's the difference? I'm asking you. What is the difference? Why is the state allowed to tell you when you're, born that it's not okay to kill you, but when you're inside the womb, it is?
Because I think that, well, I guess it also depends. Well, again, I think it comes down to like what the if we're living in, I think it really comes down to like, what is our laws based on? Because as humans, we sort of like, we've kind of created a society. I feel like the United States is, I mean, I'd call it a civilized society. I mean, I think it's like, one of the greatest countries in the world. I think it's an amazing experiment and like, free speech, free expression, freedom of religion, all these things. And I think that the issue of abortion, I think really what it is, I mean, I do agree with you that it's become something of part of a culture that's bigger. And I guess that's also why it's hard for me, because I get where you're coming from. I guess I feel deep down that I guess I can't see it as black and white. And I think that's the where
No, but I don't think you have to,
that I'm
but I don't think you have
pro-choice.
to see it as black and white. I just think that like, in other words, there seems to be some kind of like disconnect in this conversation over where, you're saying, I understand it's a life. I understand it will develop into an adult. I understand it has value, but I think the mom should kill it. That's what should be allowed to kill it if she wants to, based on her decisions that might come down to convenience, can come down to almost any reasoning. And I'm hearing that and I'm saying, well, that's a scary notion for me. And that's not an ethical kind of view of the world. And I'm not trying to attack you as a person. I think you're a very ethical person. I'm trying to say I'm trying to, and I think, if there's anything humans can do in this world is try and make it better for our children, right? I mean, that's what we want to do. We want to leave the world better off than we came into it. And so that's why I'm asking these questions.
So I agree with that, but I guess maybe, look, I think if we weren't in society that we are in right now, I might have a different opinion, especially if we were like, I mean, if you and I were living in, 200 years ago, and it was like still a new country, and it was very small, and everybody that like the idea of like having children and kind of was important. And I don't think it's not important. I guess where it comes to is like, I think where the debate kind of challenges me is like, and I think where a lot of people sort of get in the weeds, I guess, is like you said in the beginning, where it's like, just because you're Republican or conservative, might mean one thing. Just because you're Democrat might mean another thing. So, I see, pro-life activists in front of Planned Parenthood, right? I see pro-abortion or pro-choice activists against them. I've never seen a pro-life activist at a Walgreens protesting Plan B, because I think there's a sense that that's not the issue that you want to focus on. And so that's where it comes to.
What do you mean? Like, sorry, I'm not following the. So you think that pro-lifers
well,
should be protesting Plan B?
Well, I'm just like, why aren't there people protesting at Plan B at pharmacies?
There are people who protest Plan B.
So maybe there are, but that, to me, that becomes, I would say, if you
I mean, my viewpoint is one battle at a time.
Sure.
Like,
so
like,
I think in
the end of the day, Plan B does not necessarily, Plan B, and I may be wrong on this, as far as I know, it helps prevent conception from taking place. I don't know if it's actually destroying a fetus. I don't want to be quoted on that. I might be completely wrong. But if that's the case, that's very different. In other words, conception is the point of life, right? In terms of biological.
Yeah, and again, I'd have to research that too. So maybe I'm mistaken. But to me, the way that I look at it is like, I guess, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I was going to say.
Here, let's look at what we actually agree on.
Okay.
Because I think this is the most interesting part, and then that last part is fascinating too, because like we can agree on so much.
Let me just say my point real quick before we stay. Sure. So I think my point of bringing up Plan B, and again, I think we're both kind of ignorant exactly what it does. I mean, we're both pretty close. I mean, you're taking it because you're thinking you might get pregnant, so you're taking it. So whatever. But I think when it comes down to like what's going on with the Supreme Court right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the issue with Roe versus Wade, and the issue that most, I don't want to say conservatives have, but I think people that are at least critical thinkers in general, maybe, is that the basis of Roe versus Wade is based on, is it the Ninth Amendment?
Okay, there's a lot of workarounds to Roe v. Wade to make
Well,
it work, and none of them
my,
actually make sense. If you,
no, but my point being is that it's more based on the idea of a woman's right to privacy and less about abortion. So if, and correct me if I'm wrong, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, it then becomes then to each state to determine what their laws are on abortion, rather than the federal government. And
Yes.
then with that, there's also the opportunity for potentially people in those states to vote on it.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm thinking, like, that's where I think it becomes tricky. And again, I'd have to look into plan B, but it's like, I bet you if it was 50-50, I bet you would be like 75 or 80 if you brought in plan B. As far as like, yes, somebody can go to Walgreens and buy plan B.
Well, okay, so Roe v. Wade was never really constitutional. There was no baseline, writing in the Constitution to say you have a right to abort. There were a lot of lawyers who came out and tried to use like circular logic to bypass that. And so there's a lot of interesting legal writing on this. I started researching it on how they justified making this a constitutional issue. In my opinion, making it a constitutional issue is just as dangerous for pro-choice people as it is for pro-life people. That's the irony here. Because the second you make it a constitutional issue, you're basically telling the Supreme Court that they have a say in abortion, whether it's for or against, right? I mean, inevitably, this could turn around in a way that says, well, now we're going to federally mandate against abortion. There's no reason why not. You've now made the topic itself a constitutional issue, a federal issue. And so it could go one way or the other. And now the Supreme Court could find ways to justify it on either end, because we've really kind of gone and started finding loopholes in the Constitution to justify something that people felt strongly about. But half the country does not feel that way about it. They feel the exact opposite. They literally feel like you're killing a baby. So if you put that into the state's hand, that protects everyone. If you want to live in a state that you agree with their views, you can live there. If you don't want to live in that state, you can leave, or you can vote and try and change the state. But to say that the federal government should make a choice that is as complex, even sitting here and talking with you, it feels like.
Well, I agree with you on that. I mean, I agree that.
So why is it such a travesty that Roe versus Wade is overturned?
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying, because, I almost think that it's better. Well, because I think it goes back to the fact that we have agreements and we also have disagreements. I think that if it wasn't federally regulated, I think there could be more discussions about it. And I think there could be instances where, you're going to have people like, okay, for instance, like you could still, like when it comes to like the late term abortion, right? Like what if a state says, okay, you can only have it's like abortion is legal between here and there, right? And so that idea of past that time never comes up. See what I'm saying? So then it becomes a situation where it's like, okay, we both can agree that killing a baby at 8 months is unethical, immoral. It maybe potentially could be illegal. It could be a felony. But if the state decides, look, we are going to allow safe and legal abortions to anybody who can afford, I mean, look, I also understand the idea.
Wait, sorry, I want to hear the end of that. Because it jumped from 3 points. I want to make sure I understand the point.
So I think there's that issue of like, if you leave it up to the states and the states say, okay, we're only going to allow abortions, safe, legal abortions between, from the first, up to the first trimester,
Yeah.
then at that point, you've kind of like set a standard. And then at that point, it's kind of like, well, if you disagree with that, especially if it's something where the state can, especially if it's something where the people can vote on it, at that point, then it becomes an issue where it's like, well, this is regardless of what you think about it ethically or morally, this is what we've decided as a society. Now
Yes. Well, no, this is what we've decided as a state, not as a, yes, which is a big differentiator because other
that's what I
states will
meant.
feel
Like, as
differently.
well, I'm saying society based in, I'm kind of being like,
Yeah, no, but it's an important distinction because when you say society, that's actually the danger that most people should be looking at, is that imagine we as a society, 58% of people, one way or the other, said we don't believe in any term limits whatsoever, kill it whenever you want, which would be a major travesty to a huge percentage of the population. Or the opposite. Imagine we as a society, slight majority, agreed that there should be no abortions at all. So, I mean, the state distinction is a really, really important one because that can't happen anymore. That the thing you're actually scared of cannot happen when it's decided by the state. It might just suck for you if you don't like your state, which already is happening. I mean, like the truth is, the more power the states have, the better off everyone is fundamentally, because we disagree on so many fundamental issues as a country now. That's the way to preserve it. We don't need to get along. We need to sadly live in states that agree with our viewpoints at this point. These are not like the difference between someone who believes you are killing a baby and someone who believes, and you're kind of like in the middle, but let's just say the other extreme, it's just a parasite. It's a woman's choice. There's nothing happening. There's no middle ground there where in society, you are literally believing you are standing up for unborn babies and you are literally believing you are fighting for women's rights. So there's no common ground. That's like trying to be in a marriage with someone who, again, if you had those two separate viewpoints, trying to coexist with them, it would not work in terms of like being able to have a relationship. So this notion that we all have to have relationships with each other, sadly, the differentiating viewpoints in the country right now are very, very extreme. There doesn't seem to be common ground. People aren't talking. So I think that the less we can make things universal, the less we can say, hey, you federal government decide for all of us, the better. It's just the more you can bring it down to the individual, kind of a fundamental.
I agree with that, but I also think that
would you if you could set the law right now, would you put any term limits on abortion?
I couldn't. I'd have to. I think I would probably. I don't think I'm smart enough to do that. I would kind of just. I think I would be. I mean, I would say yes, because I do think that at a certain, I don't think that, baby pops his head out, you push him back in and like punch him in the head or something. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But like,
I mean, we're getting there. We're getting there. There are partial.
No, I know there are states, and I know there are states where it's like there's, even after the baby's born, if like, I mean, you kind of look at. I mean, this is to me where it could get scary, right? Like, and I haven't looked it up in a while, but as far as I know, in Iceland, in particular, you can terminate a pregnancy if you know that your baby has Down syndrome. So. Yeah. So in Iceland, I don't think there's a very, very small, if minimal amount of any type of people with Down syndrome.
Because I know this. Yeah. But that is eugenics.
It's eugenics. So that's where I think it gets dangerous. I think and I think this is dangerous. I think that's where a lot of people, and I think people like you that are pro-life, I think it's because, and I would say that I know, is that people weaponize certain things to, I don't know what the word you want to say, disregard life, make life less valuable than
dehumanize
it is. Dehumanize. That's sorry, correct. Yeah, that's what I mean. So I do think there are people that are interested in it in a way to dehumanize people. And I think that's where it's scary. Now,
but I'm not following, because fundamentally that's so contradictory, because you've said, I agree it's a human life. I agree it has value, but we should be allowed to kill it.
Well,
I'm
because
so confused by that, but then you're worried that it's going to be dehumanized.
just because
Why does it matter why? What if it doesn't have blue eyes? And
just
like,
because but that's the thing, is just because I wouldn't personally want to get in somebody's business, like, and tell somebody that they should be able to, like,
why is it only abortion that we're so scared to get into someone's business? Why, if someone killed their newborn baby for not having blue eyes, would you want to get in their business?
Well, I think that's where there's very specific laws on the books that aren't based on that are based on, like, ethics and morals that we've created as a society, as
But
far
they
as,
keep
like,
getting more and more and more and more and more lenient. I mean, and now with this, maybe the other way, but my fundamental point is the idea, so you agree, laws are based on ethics. We try
right,
and
but
make laws based on ethics.
right,
So
and we've seen that change over time too, where, like, now if you're 10 years old and you shoot and kill somebody, you can be charged as an adult, because we've determined, for whatever reason, that this child has some type of they're able to know enough between right and wrong that they should be charged with a murder, even if they're not fully an adult. And obviously that's very arbitrary, based on, because there's obviously still laws in the country where,
sure, yeah.
as long as the parent gives permission, a child can get married when they're 12 years old. In another instance, if a man just had sex with a 12-year-old, that would be pedophilia.
Of course,
So
but I mean, what we do
starts
fundamentally agree on as a society is that killing people who are not a direct threat to you is wrong,
yeah, I think we can.
except in the case of abortion.
Yeah, I think it becomes I think it's a way more complex situation, because there's a lot of variables, and I think
What
that's
are they? That's what I'm asking you. What are in other words, is it that a fetus is not a person? And if so, why? And when does it become a person? So here's my question to you.
Yeah.
What is the factor that comes into play, whether it's through development or dependence? What is that moment? What is that thing that suddenly makes it not okay to kill a person? Is it birth? What is the thing, right? Like, you agree murder is wrong. When does it become murder, and when is it wrong?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know that I'd had, even though I guess for me, let's say this, I think at a certain point, I would say that the fetus is a potential life. And I think
it's always a potential life.
It's always a potential life, but I think there's a point where,
I mean, it is a life. It is a life. It's not a potential life. It's alive, but it's a potential, developed human. It's a potential toddler. It's a potential, teenager. But it's a potential teenager from the moment it's conceived. I mean, it has unique DNA. It will come into the world, short of tragedy again. So it is, the potential life argument is true the whole way through. I mean, even when I'm born, I'm still a potential adult.
Okay, see, I guess for me, it would.
Because this is the most interesting thing I would come out of this conversation with, is for you, and I'm not judging you on it. I just genuinely want to know. And it's a good question even to ask yourself, I think, just because you like to analyze things, is what is the moment? We all agree, me and you definitely agree, murder is wrong, life has value. We agree that I agree, I believe it's a life consistently through. You seem to also agree with that, it's a life. But there's some kind of differentiating factor where you go, it's a life, it just doesn't hold equal value to other lives until this point for this reason, right? Because that's why the mother can kill it. Now, like, that could be for any reason. That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of with you. It could be because it's in the womb. It could be because it's dependent on her. We discussed viability, but I think you agree viability.
Right, and that's where I think that I'm not, like, I don't know enough about biology and science to say at what point. But see, again, to me, it becomes, because look, if I still considered, if I was like, not say that I'm not a Christian, because I do, I believe in Christ and his teachings, but let's say, like,
but let's take religion off the table. Let's rely on ethics. Let's get to Forget religion,
Well,
because then people will argue, oh, you're just saying this based on
well,
religion.
you
What
kind of
is
have,
the,
but here's the problem with ethics, right? Like,
or science, scientifically then? When does
well,
it scientifically
here's
become
the
a
thing.
person?
So I'm basically a vegan. I'm vegetarian, and so I think that now there's the concept of meat is murder, right? And now it's hard to say that because murder is a legal term, and if you kill a cow, you're not going to be charged with murder.
Because it's
So it
not a human.
becomes, well, right, but there are, I mean, you can't just go and kill a puppy on the street without repercussions.
Yeah, but you're not going to jail for murder. I mean, we as humans believe it, and I mean, again, this is probably something biologically driven. It's just inherent in all of us. We know it's more wrong to kill a human than to kill an animal.
I think that, and I guess where I come into it is like, I think that,
But it's odd to me you're a vegan, which means you won't even eat an egg, but you're okay with the mother terminating a baby, which you agree is a human life. So fascinating.
yeah, no, and I'm not saying that it's not something that I sort of, it's something that I don't necessarily, I struggle with to sort of kind of comprehend. I guess it's that even as a vegan, right, I'm not absolute, because I feel like I'm not a purist. There are times where I eat eggs, there are times I eat milk. I mean, I avoid, and it becomes, it's like a lot of times it's because when I'm traveling and something might have fish sauce in it, or maybe this thing is dipped in batter. So I'm not an absolutist when it comes to certain things. And I also, I had it, this is sort of going off topic, but there was an instance where I was talking to someone who was Native American, was Navajo, her family been in, had, she's like however many generations, right? We had this discussion and she said, well, like in our culture, we take the, if we kill a buffalo, we did it. And I go, you know what? If you invited me, if I was invited to your, to your tribe, and, you had this ceremony and you explained it to me and I understood it, I don't think that I would necessarily not participate in eating the meat. It's not that I have like this
Sure.
strong,
But if they were killing newborn babies, you would not participate.
yeah.
So
Well,
again, back to the abortion subject.
And I guess that's where, well, and I guess that's the biggest problem of the issue, because I think there is a point where most of us could say, like, it's very easy to say, like obviously, like right now, like you and I could look at each other, okay, we're grown-ass men, and if I punched you or if I stabbed you, there's no question at all of what I've just done, right?
Mhm.
Like, I either murdered you, I was attempted murder, it was attempted battery. There's like no discussion. And I think that's where I think we're having a discussion, because I'm not fully convinced, I guess, that having an abortion at a certain time is the same as me stabbing you.
But you do think if I go and I punch a pregnant woman in the stomach and kill her fetus, it is the same as you stabbing her.
Well, because you're punching the mother.
But I'm not killing the mother. I'm not
Huh?
killing her. Is it assault or is it murder? Let's say I go and I punch a woman in the stomach who's pregnant with the intention of killing her baby because I got her pregnant and I don't
Well,
want
yeah,
her.
because I think, and
Would that be murder?
Yes, because she's made the choice to carry the baby out to full birth.
Okay, so this is to me the most interesting standard for value of human life. So the baby is only a baby when the mother decides that she's going to carry it to full term, which can be changed at any moment, and then it's not a baby anymore. It's something that you can kill. What if she's on her way to get it aborted and I punch her in the stomach and I kill it? Then it's not murder.
Well, I don't know.
Do you see how morally?
I don't know that they could. It depends, I think, when you punched her.
To you, is it murder to you?
Uh-huh. If what?
There's like what? There's some magical thing happens where when you go, the mom wants it. Oh, it's just suddenly turned into.
I don't think it's magical. I just think it becomes part. I think it just becomes part of what we decide as.
I think it decides. So unethical, the standard you're using. You're saying, well, it's nothing until the mom says it's something, and the second she says it's something, it's a human life, and you cannot touch it. But if she suddenly decides it's not, go ahead, do whatever you want to it. It's nothing.
I don't think it's necessarily unethical, because I think that it's still, it's no longer the woman's choice. It's your choice to punch her. Do you see what I'm
Sure,
saying?
but why? But what does the woman's choice have to do with killing? It's not a woman's choice to kill her newborn baby. It's not a woman's choice to kill her best friend. It's not a woman's choice to kill her 10-year-old son.
Well,
It's
but
not
that's
a
the thing
woman's
is,
choice to kill a baby. Bottom
well, but the
line,
thing,
whether it's
well,
inside or
but the
stomach or
reality
outside.
is that but there currently is that choice.
Yes, and I think
And
that
so,
choice
and so
is a problem.
you could say that it's a problem, but it's like, I,
You know,
I
look, but to say that there currently is that choice is the same thing to say if you exist in any society that's practicing something entirely unethical, well, that option exists, therefore too bad. I mean, sure, you know what I mean? If I go back 100 years, there were a lot of things happening in this country which were legal, which I'm fundamentally against. And if they were happening again, I'd be fundamentally against them. I wouldn't say, well, we exist in this society that says these things are okay. If we just decided to kill all the homeless people in the country, I wouldn't just shut up and go, I shouldn't have an opinion about that, right? I wouldn't try and change it. And
yeah,
so fundamentally, an innocent baby inside the womb that will grow up to be an adult, we know this,
well,
should not be killed just because it's a woman's choice. That's the fundamental. Why is it a woman's choice to kill the baby? And in other words, there's no standard in law. There's no standard in law where it's the choice to kill somebody, whether woman or male, unless there is a really specific cause, imminent harm on your life, right? And so we would agree that if the fetus is about to kill the mom because some kind of reaction takes place, or the only option is to remove the fetus, sure, I get that. But that's not 99.999% of abortion. And so there's to talk about that seems irrelevant because I think most of us agree on it. So fundamentally speaking, what you're trying to justify is murder based on the woman's choice. Now that won't hold up, I think, when you really sit and think about it, which is why I kept trying to go back to what is the point that it becomes a life that has value? Because if you think it's a life that has value, but that the mother should be allowed to kill it because she doesn't want it, that's a pretty scary thought. And this is where moral relativism comes into place. I believe there are certain absolute truths, and we seem to agree human life has value. So the only argument I feel you can make that's consistent is, well, at this point, it's not really a life that has value, and this is why. And so I'm trying to get you there just so I can question it, essentially.
sure, yeah, I understand. I guess for me, though, it just becomes more complex because I think there's also situations that has changed society that it even has to become to the point where a choice would even want to be made. I mean, I don't know what the Catholic Church's stance is still on it, but as far as I remember, they encourage people to not use condoms. There's this idea. I mean, there is this
okay,
idea.
but that, I mean,
But
scientifically,
let me
that's
just
why I
say,
don't
let
want
me
to
just
get
say,
into religion. I don't
no,
want to,
no, but without getting it, but without getting into religion, there could also be a debate to say that people shouldn't have sex unless they're trying to procreate. That there shouldn't that sex should not be just for pleasure. That sex should just be to procreate.
because of what? Of potential to
Because
get
well,
someone pregnant?
because of the consequences. Because if
Sure, a lot of people do preach that. They believe we should be having more, at a minimum, something I would preach is that we have more responsible sex. It's not a matter of being promiscuous. I think that's a whole other conversation, the ethics of
look,
promiscuity and
I
the
think
effects it has on people. But in other words, a sperm is not a human being. A sperm has to come into contact with, it has to fertilize an egg in order to become a human being. So prior to conception, a lot of people will be like, well, then when you kill sperm, you're killing a human being. I'm like, no, I'm not. For a sperm to become a human being, action has to be taken. For a fetus to not become a human being, action has to be taken. They're actually fundamentally opposite. And one action is taken to create life, and the other action is taken to end it, right? Left to natural development. A sperm will just go out and die if it's not fertilizing anything.
I would just, I guess my opinion is, and maybe you see it as unethical, but I guess, and I don't know, and I can't give you the absolute reason. It's something that I'd have to think about. I feel a woman should be able to terminate her pregnancy at a certain point, and I don't think she should be arrested for it. I don't think the doctor should be arrested. I don't think it should be illegal. I think that there can be, I of course.
But why? But why? And that's the final note. I want you to give why, and I won't even argue.
Okay.
I just want to hear why.
Because I think that in the current society that we live in, I think there are too many unknowns to make absolute laws, because even if statistically what's brought up is a very small percentage, I think there's a lot of complexities that you can't account for. So for me, I feel more comfortable saying that a woman should be able to terminate their pregnancy within a certain time frame.
What is that time frame?
I don't know. I'd have to, I mean, I tend to, because here's the thing is like, when I read into Roe versus Wade, you know, I kind of agreed with what they said about, you know, it was like first, second trimester. Then I know with the case afterwards, I can't remember, you probably know what it is.
Well, no, but based on viability, and viability has completely changed.
Well, exactly. Well, that's what I mean. I mean, because, and that's where I think, and that's where
viability is a weird standard to justify killing.
That's no, I know. And again, that's where I think things have become again more complicated, because viability now, because of you know, advances in science, advances in sanitation, you know, all these things, you know, a baby is way more viable than it ever's been in our lifetime for a woman. I mean, there's a lot, you know, I mean, I'm sure there's, you know, I don't know. I'm sure there was way more women hundreds of years ago that died during childbirth than do now.
For sure. Yeah. Last question for you.
Okay.
If we get to the point where we can remove a fetus at 2 months safely from a mother's womb, and it can grow in, you know, an incubator, right? So should we would you be against abortion at that point where we could safely remove it? There's no risk to the mother and the baby will grow up. Would you say, no, every woman should have to have it now removed instead, and so that baby has a life?
I guess, again, I think it's complicated, but I could imagine a sense where somebody said, look, if you want to remove the fetus, we can take it, we can put it.
It's just so interesting. You're like, no, I want the mom to be able to kill it.
Well, here's another thing, right? Here's another thing. What if it gets to the point that, where like, okay, your baby can be put in an incubator and grow, but then once it becomes a certain age, it's going to be shipped to Mars and they're going to work in mines.
Again, that's a whole other argument. Someone having a difficult life is not a justification to kill them. I mean, there's lots of newborn babies that are born into poor families that are going to have very difficult lives. And I don't say, well, because they're born into like a rough neighborhood and the dad left and like the mom's a drug addict, we should just go kill that newborn baby or that 5-year-old. I mean, again, that's an argument that a difficult life somehow makes you less valuable. That's not a path I like to go down.
Okay, so yeah, because of, well, but then I think it just, again, to me, it becomes part of.
Final notes, and then we call it, because we went an hour.
Yeah, that was kind of long.
My question for you is this: did you feel like you had a good conversation? Did it change your ideas at all on anything?
No, I feel like I had a good conversation. I don't know if I changed my ideas, but I definitely think that you had said things that I thought about. I mean, again, I told you beforehand that I was kind of coming into this, not, you know, more so just like wanting to talk about it, have a discussion. Here, you know, I wanted to hear your opinion, and I sort of wanted to work out where my opinion is. You know, I think that out of this conversation, I think one thing that I definitely want to do is look up what happens with what the deal is with Plan B.
I'm gonna look that up too. I'm
I
just
want to
curious
know
about it.
I want to know if it could potentially end conception. Um,
You know what I think would be really cool if you like even came back and just told me like, hey, like take your time and figure it out and just say, here's the point where I think it is right and wrong and why. I mean, like if it became, and it doesn't, it could have obviously, however you come to that conclusion, because right now you're saying there's a point, you feel like there's a point, you don't know why and you don't know when. And I think if you leave this conversation and you analyze that, maybe that's like a follow-up conversation we have. And then
well, and I think that's an important conversation, because I think alternatively, we could very well likely have another civil war based on abortion. Potentially, you know, and I don't know if that and so, you know, I think there has to be discussions, because, as you know, even though you say that you don't want to bring up religion, I think that a lot of people that bring up, especially in the pro-life community, it really has a lot to do with their religious value.
It actually doesn't. It has to do, and this is something that I have chosen to believe in, that the universe has some absolute truths. It's not religion. Religion just is very tied into the notion of absolute truth. It's absolute truth versus moral relativism, right? Okay. It's the idea that all human life is inherently valuable and that a fetus is still a human life. It's still a baby, or it's not. And that not all human life has value, right? That becomes morally relative. If you're religious, you do believe that. A lot of people who aren't religious believe that too. They believe there's certain apps. So this is really a debate of absolute truth versus moral relativism.
Well, like I said,
are ambiguous, and that there are no certainties, and that a life doesn't necessarily have value just for being alive, a human life. And so yeah, but come back.
Yeah. I guess the point is, like, I'd love to come back, talk to you again, do some research, and at least have an idea to say when I think that I would believe that, like, it's why I think it's okay and why I think it's okay.
I would love that. And I want to applaud you also for being willing to come on, being willing to also not only come on, but come on kind of unprepared and hash out your ideas and your viewpoints, and being willing to share them with people in a way that people can watch you kind of work through your ideas. And I think that that's very rare nowadays. You seem like you're open to even having your mind changed if it comes to that, or questioning your beliefs. So I think that's extremely rare nowadays. And it's just nice to see. So I appreciate that. And again, give your clothing company a shout out one more time before we
Mishka NYC. Goodbye, this pink you know.
Spell it out.
MISHKA NYC, like New York City. If you the 1979, I think, Olympics, Russian Olympics, is that when Russia had Olympics? Or was it 78? No, 1980 Olympics in Russia. That was their mascot. Their bear was called Mishka. So,
all right, brother. Thanks so much.
All right, bro. Good to talk to you, man.